My name is John Graham, and I'm from Salt Lake City, Utah. Well, it was sort of a wandering way to decide to be an orthodontist. I initially trained in oral and maxillofacial surgery and decided that that wasn't the lifestyle that I wanted to carve out for myself. So I decided to switch to orthodontics, and it was a natural transition because I was still working with dentofacial anatomy and growth and development. And I'd worked with numerous orthodontists doing orthognathic cases. So I always envied their life. Uh, and so I decided I'm going to do the same. Well, I mean, I guess that's kind of a broad question, but you know, especially in orthodontics, we say it a lot, but um, it's like winning life's lottery being an orthodontist. You have healthy patients when they start, you have healthy patients when they finish. They're almost all very happy at the end of their treatment. And that transformation and being able to establish a relationship with those patients, that's what orthodontics means to me. And it's why I just think it's the greatest profession in the world. That's a really good question. And the way that I think about it is tooth alignment, weirdly, um, is the only, let's call it, anomaly that people may have that brings judgment onto the person with big gaps between their teeth or really crooked teeth. And the way I think about it is if you saw somebody coming down the street and they were missing an arm, you may feel like, man, that's a bummer, but you don't judge the person and say, what's wrong with that guy? He's missing an arm. But if you have somebody who is well put together, well spoken, and then they smile and they've got like terrible teeth, terrible alignment, instantaneously, you think, what's wrong with you? Don't you know that your teeth are all jacked up, at least in the United States? So I think for the public, it means confidence and lack of judgment from other people. I think it means a lot more than we typically think of just a straight smile. I think it's vital to most people in the United States, and that is, why we're so grateful to be orthodontists. I'm a wannabe musician. In college, I was in multiple bands. I was in a duo in dental school, playing the guitar and singing and that kind of thing. And I did it all the time until I got married. And then I stopped, and I think it's because I got the girl, which is why you play guitar in the first place. And so I didn't need to anymore, but I miss it, and I'm starting to get back into it. Wow. I mean, just when you think you've got one of the most difficult cases, another one comes in, and you're like, woof, that's difficult. I think that probably severe class three patients, especially if there's a skeletal component, it isn't hard if they elect to do surgery. And the hardest part of that is convincing them to do surgery because it's a big deal. And that takes a difficult case and makes it easy. But if they elect not to do surgery, uh, even with severe class two cases, that becomes a real challenge because you're not only balancing the way the teeth come together, but you're trying to have some semblance of stability after the treatment is over, which you rarely get when you've got big discrepancies between the jaws. Oh man, I think the digital acquisition of teeth and ultimately leading to printing of models and making aligners and things like that. The fact that we don't have to take impressions anymore makes it so patients like us again. And that's amazing. and there's no distortion, right? So everything we make off of those scans, whether it's a holding appliance or aligners or whatever, they actually fit, and they fit perfectly because there's no distortion. So at least in my opinion, that's probably the biggest change in ortho, since I was a baby orthodontist. That's a really, really good question. Um, I think that I think clear aligners are still going to be probably move to being the largest portion of the way that we treat patients simply because of patient demand. But I think that's going to get even better and better, especially with the ability that we're starting to gain in 3D printing trays directly and not thermofitting them over a model and then trimming them at the end. The exciting part of that is that given the types of plastics that can be used, you can change the force differential in different areas of the tray, kind of like a bioactive wire that we have, where there's different force values delivered depending on where you are in the wire, and that is ultimately going to be where we are with clear aligners. And I think that's going to open up a whole new ability for we as providers to treat even more difficult cases. Initially, as an orthodontic resident, I preferred the JCO over the other periodical that I won't mention, just because it was clinical. And not only clinical, it was also business oriented. And, all of us, that was what was on our mind. So I would say initially that. Then I submitted a couple of articles for publication, and they got accepted and published. And then I was invited to join the team. It was a high honor to do so, a very high honor. And I think bringing perspective from a surgery background as well as ortho was something that maybe they were hoping to glean from me sitting on the contributing editing board. But it was a great honor. So that's how I ended up here. Well, I've thought about this a lot, um, because I get a lot of journals. I still get medical journal, publications, things like that. The Journal of Clinical Orthodontics has always been relevant. And it's interesting to me that the other publication that is in our specialty, they're now attempting to do a clinical section. And that's a little too late. The JCO has always been there. And, every single issue, there's something that you find, whether it's a pearl or business related or a really cool case or new products. It's always been singularly focused on how to directly impact a practitioner in their practice of orthodontics. It's the only one that does that. And that's just so cool. Well, I think it's an avenue for clinicians to be clinical, instead of clinicians reading about type 2 collagen in a mouse TMJ study, which is maybe interesting, but doesn't really apply to what we do every day. Everything in the Journal of Clinical Orthodontics can be applied in some way, fashion, manner. It's not overwhelmingly big, which a lot of journals are, to the point where they just stack up on your desk. I look forward to it's one of the few that I get that I rip the plastic off before I open all the other mail, because I just love it. It is concise, it is impactful and interesting. And I think it's one of the best parts of our profession. Credibility, for one, right? And whether it means a lot to patients, it doesn't really matter, in my opinion. Credibility amongst colleagues. Um, I think we need both. I think we need both. I think we need peer-reviewed, uh, journals so that we keep each other honest and we have a level of trust in the results or in the case presentations. We know that it has been seen by others that think this is going to help contribute to the profession. But I think we also need to be tapped into orthodontic internet forums, Reddit, whatever, because that's the patient's journal of clinical orthodontics, right? It's their experiences. It's what matters to them, and it's a good avenue for finding out what fears do patients have, what concerns do they have, what hopes do they have in treatment. So I think both are very, very helpful. Yeah, I mean, I think that what I've learned in the aggregate is how to balance being a good clinician with being a good business person, because we get a little taste of both in many of the issues, and they're both necessary. And it doesn't matter if you're working for an orthodontic service organization, or you're a private practitioner, or you're in academics. Um, that combination of business acumen, because I mean, ultimately that's how we are able to continue doing what we do, is we have to focus on the business side, but it also keeps us clinically minded. And I think that combination of being a good clinician and making wise business choices is something that bubbles to the top for me when I think about the JCO in aggregate, for from all the way back at as early as it started. It's really brought that gift to practicing orthodontists. Well, because you're going to be missing out on all of that awesome stuff. I mean, I'll tell you, one of the reasons that I love it is subscriptions, is that you have access to all of the archived editions. And so if you're putting a presentation together, and you think you remember a clinical pearl or whatnot, you're able to get on the JCO's website and just type in keywords or author names or whatever, and they're available for everybody. The other thing is, I mean, I think that it's something to look, it sounds silly, but it's something to look forward to every month. I mean, I don't look forward to any other journals that sit on my desk. I look forward to the JCO because I know there's going to be something in there that I like. So it keeps me dialed in to current techniques and technology. I think that is critical for any practicing orthodontist. Man, that's another good question. I think probably perspective. Um, Everything is a really big deal when you start fresh out of residency. Everything is a little bit terrifying. Every comment from a patient feels like that's the last comment you're ever going to get for the rest of your life. And I think that being an orthodontist for almost 24 years now, you gain perspective, and you're able to take those situations and understand where they are in the big picture, and that they're all just little things. And the big things are family and helping people in your profession. I think that perspective would have made my early years much less anxiety ridden. Wow. I think probably um, be grateful for the important stuff in life. The important stuff is family, it's health, it's freedom. Those things are the most important. It's so easy to get bogged down and focus on nothing but all the small fires that need to be put out in a busy ortho practice. It can be overwhelming. More commonly, it's just defeating, and you just feel exhausted at the end of the day, and you're thinking, "Why am I doing this?" But zooming out and kind of taking a macro look at things, for me, it makes me more grateful for my profession. I feel very lucky to be an orthodontist, and it makes me more grateful for all of the things that we work so hard to enjoy, all of the things that we do to enhance our lives. Don't give up is the first one. The second one is uh, soak up everything every clinical instructor says. It doesn't mean you're going to use it. You probably won't, but they bring so much experience. Um, I would hang on every word the clinical orthodontists, and I'm differentiating those from the ones that are doing lectures and stuff. The ones that are seeing patients, those little gems that you get from those instructors are just priceless, and it's in a very vulnerable time in a resident's young mind, and so they typically stick, but they're good foundational things. I have fond memories of those that my instructors. I didn't necessarily do everything they did, but I never forgot what they told me. And every once in a while, something would bubble up, and I'd be like, "Oh man, I know that. I should have known that because I was told that." So, yeah, that'd be my advice. Well, there's a lot, right? So, but I think most of my patients are aligner patients, maybe 85% of my practice, maybe 90%. And one of the things that I've started doing standard on almost all patients is trimming their trays in the last tray. We used to do that a lot in ortho. In fact, Tom Mulligan, who did Common Sense Orthodontics, he would get all the alignment done, and then he would take their wires out. Uh, he was testing for stability, but it was a pretty bold and genius thing to do. But it would allow occlusion to settle in. Back then, they were in the world of positioners at the end because they were banded cases, right? Um, it's no different with aligners. In fact, it's even harder with aligners to get great occlusion in the posterior because for 18 months or 2 years, patients have been living with 2 millimeters of plastic between their back teeth. So trimming the trays, almost by standard protocol, is one of the things that I do, um, which allows their posterior bite to settle beautifully in most cases. Patients understand it when it's explained to them why you're doing it. You're removing that obstacle between the back teeth, and it totally makes sense to them. So I think that's done a lot for me in my aligner finishes, in the things that I struggled with the most. So that's probably one of the top ones that comes to mind.